It's called LATAM Story, and it's putting out truly exceptional content about Latin American history. From the vibrant cultures of ancient civilizations to the struggles of modern movements, LATAM Story is a treasure trove for history lovers. Do yourself a favor and check it out. This is one channel you don't want to miss. Now let's dive into our story. The Iroquois Confederacy. A beacon of democracy in the New World. Picture yourself in the dense forests of what is now Upper New York, centuries before European colonists set foot on these lands. The air is thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the sound of crackling fires fills the evening as families gather under the wooden beams of longhouses, their homes. These longhouses were not just places of shelter, but symbols of unity. Built to house multiple families, these dwellings reflected the Iroquois people's deep-rooted belief in community, interdependence, and collective decision-making. The people of the Iroquois Confederacy, who refer to themselves as the Haudenosaunee, or the people of the Longhouse, were more than just inhabitants of these dense forests. They were the architects of one of the oldest, most resilient participatory democracies the world has ever seen. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy, often called the Iroquois Confederacy, united 5, later 6 distinct nations: the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora. Together, they formed a powerful political and social alliance that thrived for centuries, defying the odds in a land marked by fierce competition, external threats, and cultural upheavals. The formation of the Confederacy, a vision of peace amidst chaos, but the origins of the Iroquois Confederacy were not always peaceful. The Six Nations story begins in a time of darkness, when the lands were plagued by conflict. Feuds between tribes, both internal and external, led to relentless bloodshed. It was a time when vengeance ruled, and the dream of peace seemed like a distant, unreachable fantasy. Legend tells of a man named the Great Peacemaker, who came from the northern shores of Lake Ontario. Together with his ally, Hiawatha, a man mourning the loss of his daughters and driven by grief, they journeyed across the region, preaching the possibility of peace and unity. Their message was simple but powerful. Only by setting aside personal grudges, only by working together, could the Haudenosaunee find true strength and ensure their survival. Their vision wasn't just about ending wars. It was about building something far greater. The Great Peacemaker and Hiawatha envisioned a system where no one leader held absolute power, where decisions were made collectively, ensuring that all voices, even the smallest and the weakest, were heard. The Great Law of Peace, the Haudenosaunee Constitution, was born from this vision. Its impact was so profound that it even inspired the development of modern democratic systems. Some historians argue that the founding fathers of the United States took inspiration from the structure of the Iroquois Confederacy when drafting the U.S. Constitution. Governance and diplomacy. A model of collective wisdom, the governance of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy was nothing short of revolutionary. Unlike monarchies where kings ruled by divine right, or empires that expanded through force, the Haudenosaunee placed their faith in collective wisdom. Each nation within the Confederacy sent representatives, known as sachems, to the Grand Council. But these sachems were not dictators. They were entrusted with the responsibility to listen to their people and to represent their views faithfully. The Grand Council convened in the heart of the Confederacy, at Onondaga, where decisions were made not by majority rule, but by consensus. Every voice had to be heard, and every nation had to agree before any course of action was taken. The Onondaga Nation held a unique role as the firekeepers, overseeing the council's discussions and ensuring fairness and balance. This system of governance was as intricate as it was effective. Not only did it promote unity among the nations, but it also allowed them to present a united front when dealing with external forces. Whether negotiating treaties or defending their land, the Haudenosaunee's ability to speak as one was key to their resilience. The clash with European powers. Strength tested by foreign invaders as the 17th century dawned, a new challenge arose from across the Atlantic: the arrival of European colonists. French, Dutch, and later English settlers were drawn to the region's wealth of resources, particularly the lucrative fur trade. At first, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy sought to maintain diplomatic ties with these newcomers, carefully navigating the complex web of alliances and enmities that stretched across the continent. But these diplomatic efforts were not without peril. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy found itself embroiled in the Beaver Wars, a brutal series of conflicts with French-backed tribes over control of the fur trade. With a tenacity that mirrored their unity, the Iroquois fought fiercely, extending their influence across vast territories, from the Ohio Valley to the Great Lakes. Their ability to adapt to European weaponry, such as muskets, coupled with their sophisticated military strategies, made them formidable opponents. Yet, the Europeans were not only interested in trade. As more settlers arrived, they encroached upon Haudenosaunee lands, testing the Confederacy's resolve. In response, the Iroquois played a delicate balancing act, forming alliances with the British during the French and Indian War, using diplomacy as their greatest weapon. The Confederacy's influence grew, but so did the pressures from foreign powers determined to carve up the land for their own. Legacy and impact. A lasting influence despite the trials they faced, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy's legacy endures. Their system of governance, built on consensus, mutual respect, and shared responsibility, continues to inspire democratic principles today. Even as European colonization reshaped the continent and forced many native nations into submission, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy remains steadfast in its commitment to peace and unity. In fact, the influence of the Iroquois Confederacy extends far beyond the shores of North America. As one of the first democracies to emphasize equal representation and checks on authority, their principles have echoed through history, resonating in the halls of power around the globe. And though the Haudenosaunee no longer hold the vast territories they once did, their teachings about governance, unity, and diplomacy are as relevant today as ever. In a world still struggling with conflict and division, the story of the Iroquois Confederacy serves as a reminder that the power of peace, combined with a commitment to collective decision-making, can stand against even the greatest of odds. Their story is a testament to the enduring strength of democracy, an idea that has withstood the test of time and continues to inspire generations. The Iroquois Confederacy, known as the Haudenosaunee, is a fascinating chapter in the history of North America. Originally composed of 5 nations, the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca, it was later joined by the Tuscarora. Together, these nations formed one of the most advanced and enduring examples of political unity among indigenous peoples in pre-colonial North America. Their great law of peace became the backbone of their governance, fostering a sense of solidarity and cooperation that would sustain their people for centuries. However, the creation of this confederacy was anything but peaceful. It was born out of chaos, bloodshed, and a profound desire for peace. Before the formation of the Confederacy, these Iroquois nations were locked in constant warfare with each other. The land they inhabited, which stretched across what is now New York State, was soaked in the blood of warriors. Revenge killings, territorial disputes, and a cycle of violence had become the grim norm. This was a time when survival meant striking first, and the balance of power was precarious at best. Each nation struggled for dominance, and it seemed that the conflict would never end. In the midst of this violence, an unlikely figure emerged, a man known as the Peacemaker. His true name has been lost to time, as much of Iroquois history is passed down orally, but his impact is undeniable. Some believed he came from the Huron Nation. Others said he was born among the Iroquois themselves. His origins are shrouded in mystery, and yet his mission was clear: to end the senseless bloodshed and bring peace to the warring nations. The Peacemaker was said to have a powerful vision, one that showed him how the Iroquois could live in harmony. It was a vision of unity, where each nation would retain its independence but come together under a single constitution, a framework that would promote collective decision-making and mutual respect. This vision was not only spiritual but practical, and it would come to be known as the Great Law of Peace. The Peacemaker's journey was not easy. His message of peace was not immediately welcomed by those who had grown accustomed to war. After all, how could trust be built between nations that had been killing each other for generations? The peacemaker needed an ally, someone who could help him spread his message and give it weight among the people. That ally came in the form of Hiawatha, a respected Onondaga chief. Hiawatha's story is one of deep personal tragedy. He was a man in mourning, having lost his daughters to the senseless violence that plagued his land. Consumed by grief, he wandered aimlessly, searching for a way to heal his broken heart. It was during this dark period of his life that he encountered the peacemaker. Moved by the peacemaker's vision and words, Hiawatha found a renewed sense of purpose. Together, the two men set out on an epic journey to convince the Iroquois nations to put down their weapons and embrace the idea of peace. However, their quest was far from straightforward. One of their greatest challenges was a feared and powerful Onondaga war chief named Tadadaho. Tadadaho was not only a formidable leader, but he was also said to be a sorcerer capable of bending the will of others to his own. Legend describes him as a twisted, malevolent figure, with a body so contorted by hatred and anger that snakes grew from his head like hair. His cruelty was legendary, and he ruled through fear, encouraging the ongoing violence between the Iroquois nations. If peace was to be achieved, Tadadaho had to be convinced to change his ways. This would be the ultimate test of the peacemaker and Hiawatha's resolve. The duo approached Tadadaho cautiously, knowing full well the danger they faced. They spoke to him of the great law of peace, of unity and the strength that could come from cooperation rather than conflict. But Tadadaho was resistant, his mind as twisted as his body. He would not be easily swayed. In one of the most dramatic moments in Iroquois history, Hiawatha, using the words of the peacemaker, managed to break through Tadadaho's hatred. Legend tells that Hiawatha combed the snakes from Tadadaho's hair, symbolizing the removal of the venomous thoughts that had poisoned his mind for so long. As the snakes were untangled, so too was Tadadaho's spirit. He was transformed, not only in body but in soul. In a powerful act of reconciliation, Tadadaho accepted the peacemaker's vision and became a vital part of the Confederacy. In fact, Tadadaho's position as a chief became one of great honor, as he was later appointed the head of the Grand Council of the Confederacy. With Tadadaho's acceptance, the Iroquois Confederacy was solidified. The Great Law of Peace was established, creating a system of governance that was revolutionary for its time. Each nation maintained its autonomy but agreed to work together in the Grand Council, where decisions were made by consensus. This council became a model of democracy, one that would later inspire key figures like Benjamin Franklin during the formation of the United States Constitution. The timing of the Confederacy's formation remains a topic of debate among historians. Some believe it took place as early as the late 1100s, while others argue it happened closer to the late 1500s. Because the Iroquois did not have a written language, their history was preserved through oral tradition, passed down from generation to generation. The exact date may be uncertain, but the significance of the Confederacy is undeniable. The Great Law of Peace outlined the roles and responsibilities of the different nations within the Confederacy. It emphasized the importance of unity, equity, and collective decision-making. The symbol of the Confederacy, the Tree of Peace, became a powerful reminder of the values they shared. It was said that weapons of war were buried beneath this tree, symbolizing the end of conflict and the beginning of a new era of peace. However, the Iroquois Confederacy was not immune to external threats. As European settlers began to arrive in North America, the Haudenosaunee were forced to navigate a complex and often treacherous relationship with these newcomers. The Confederacy's strategic location made them valuable allies in the fur trade, but it also put them in the crosshairs of European powers like the French, English, and Dutch, each vying for control of the continent. The Iroquois skillfully played European powers against each other, maintaining their sovereignty for many years. Yet the arrival of European settlers also brought devastating consequences. The introduction of new diseases, such as smallpox, decimated entire communities. The Iroquois Confederacy faced internal struggles as well, as pressures from the encroaching settlers and their expanding colonies began to test the bonds that held the nations together. Despite these challenges, the Iroquois Confederacy remained a formidable force well into the 18th century. Their political and military prowess earned them respect, even as European colonists sought to undermine their influence. The Confederacy's system of governance, based on the Great Law of Peace, became a symbol of what indigenous peoples could achieve when united. Today, the legacy of the Iroquois Confederacy endures. The Haudenosaunee people continue to honor the Great Law of Peace, and their influence can still be felt in modern governance systems. The Iroquois Confederacy stands as a testament to the power of unity, peace, and resilience in the face of unimaginable adversity. Their story is not just one of survival, but of triumph, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the light of peace can shine through. In the dim light of early dawn, two figures stood at the threshold of a new era. One was the great peacemaker, a man of calm strength, his presence serene yet unshakable. Beside him was Hiawatha, known far and wide for his wisdom, who had suffered great loss and tragedy, but emerged with a vision that transcended vengeance. Their mission was bold and, to many, impossible. They sought to unite 5 nations, whose histories were stained with blood and conflict, into a single confederacy built on peace. The land of the Iroquois had long been ravaged by war. The Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca tribes, each proud and fiercely independent, had been locked in cycles of violence for generations. The constant warring had left fields abandoned, families torn apart, and a sense of hopelessness hanging in the air. But Hiawatha, guided by the peacemaker, saw another way. They believed that even the deepest hatred could be transformed into understanding, and that unity, not conquest, was the path forward. Their journey began with the Mohawks, the easternmost of the Iroquois nations. It was here that the peacemaker first spoke of his vision, a vision of peace so profound it startled even the most hardened warriors. The peacemaker's words were simple but powerful. He spoke of a great tree of peace that would rise, tall, with roots spreading in all directions, reaching every corner of the land. He called for the burying of weapons beneath this tree, a symbolic act of laying down violence to embrace dialogue and consensus. But the path to peace was not easy. The Mohawk leaders, known for their ferocity in battle, were skeptical. Could the bitterness of centuries really be washed away with words? Could enemies become brothers, sitting side by side in council rather than across the battlefield? Hiawatha, who had once been consumed by grief and rage after the murder of his family, stood as a living testament to the power of change. He spoke with a passion that came not from force, but from the heart, recounting how the peacemaker had shown him a way out of his despair. His eloquence moved the Mohawk chiefs, who agreed to listen further. As they traveled to the other nations, Hiawatha and the peacemaker faced resistance. Among the Onondaga, a powerful and feared chief named Tadadaho stood as the greatest obstacle. Tadadaho was known not just for his cunning, but for his twisted, deformed body and wild appearance, his hair matted with snakes. His very presence inspired fear, and many believed him to be untouchable, beyond the reach of reason or compassion. Tadadaho had ruled through terror, and he had no desire to give up his power. The peacemaker, however, did not see Tadadaho as a lost cause. He believed that even the darkest souls could be healed. In a dramatic confrontation, Hiawatha approached Tadadaho with the same gentleness and conviction that had swayed the others. But Tadadaho was unmoved, hurling threats and insults. It seemed that the peace would never be accepted as long as Tadadaho remained in power. Then, something extraordinary happened. Hiawatha, with great courage, offered to heal Tadadaho's body and soul. The peacemaker, placing his hand on the twisted chief, began to sing a sacred song of healing. As the melody filled the air, something shifted in Tadadaho. Slowly, the snakes that had coiled through his hair began to slither away. His body, once contorted with pain and anger, relaxed. For the first time in years, his eyes softened. Tadadaho, who had long been a symbol of cruelty, knelt before the peacemaker and Hiawatha, accepting the great law of peace. It was a moment of profound transformation, not just for Tadadaho, but for the entire Iroquois Confederacy. The acceptance of the most feared and powerful chief marked the beginning of a new era. The peacemaker and Hiawatha then called for a grand council meeting. Here, leaders from each of the 5 nations gathered. The air was thick with tension, as old enemies sat side by side for the first time without weapons. But as Hiawatha rose to speak, a calm descended over the crowd. He spoke of the great law of peace, a constitution that would unite the nations under one confederacy, while still allowing each to maintain its autonomy. The Grand Council of Chiefs, he explained, would be formed, and decisions would be made through consensus, not violence.